From a flicker of candlelight in 1789 to the glare of modern screens in the West Wing, every president has held the pen. Executive orders not passed by Congress, but etched into law by command. Some shaped history. Some sparked controversy. Others were forgotten. Until now. This is where we break them down. Every signature, every shift in power, every consequence still felt today. From Washington to Biden, welcome to Executive Order Watch.
Democracy, we live for it. For democracy, we fight for it. For democracy, we've died for it. And for democracy, we watch it. This is Executive Order Watch.
1974, a year like no other. The nation trembled under the weight of corruption. The echoes of Vietnam still haunted our collective conscience. And here I am, Millions Williams, stepping through the corridors of consequence, trying to locate a man lost in time. Joseph R. Biden, Jr., just 31 years old, a first-term senator from Delaware, still grieving the tragic loss of his wife and daughter. He wasn't in the spotlight then, no cameras following him, no motorcade down Constitution Avenue, just a young man with a stutter, a spine, and something to prove. Every trail I follow leads to someone else's scandal. Nixon's tapes, Ford's pardon, the resignation that cracked the White House open like a busted safe. And yet, no Biden. Not here in the papers, not yet on the stage. These orders shaped the battlefield, energy crisis, economic stagnation, the shifting tides of Cold War diplomacy. But behind the noise, I swear I hear him, not shouting, listening, learning, waiting for his moment. There, that voice, quiet, deliberate, defiant, he's questioning the limits of executive power. A whisper in a roaring decade, but even whispers have weight when history listens. I came here to find Joe Biden in 1974. What I found was a seed, not yet a president, not yet a leader, but a man forged in grief, tested by power, and grounded in duty. He wasn't made in the spotlight, he was tempered in the shadows, and if we want to understand the present, we must respect the silence where it all began. This is Millions Williams, and the search continues. Because history doesn't just echo, it evolves.
1974. It was a year that cracked the foundation, and somehow held it together at the same time. We watched a sitting president resign in disgrace for the first time in our nation's history. Richard Nixon, brought down not by a foreign war or political rivalry, but by his own abuse of power. Watergate wasn't just a scandal. It was a test of our Constitution and of our character. And when Nixon stepped down, a quiet man stepped in, Gerald Ford. He didn't campaign for that office. He wasn't elected to it, but he accepted it with humility, with steadiness, and with a mission to heal. He told us our long national nightmare is over, and we wanted to believe him. But let's not forget, 74 wasn't just about Washington. We were in the middle of an oil crisis that sent gas prices soaring and families scrambling. Inflation was eating into paychecks. The Cold War kept our nerves on edge. The country was bruised. Distrust was high. And me, I was still new to it all. A young senator, barely a year in, still carrying the grief of losing my wife and baby girl. But I showed up. I asked the hard questions. I listened more than I spoke. I learned that power should serve the people, not the other way around. We were rebuilding something back then. Not just policy, not just politics, but trust. That work never ends. So now, let me step aside and hand the mic to the man who's been tracing these steps through history, Gerald Ford. Tell them where this story takes us next.
My name is Gerald Rudolph Ford, Jr., but I wasn't born with that name. I came into this world in Omaha, Nebraska in 1913 as Leslie Lynch King, Jr. After my mother left my biological father, she married a kind man named Gerald Ford. And he gave me more than his name. He gave me his character. I grew up in Grand Rapids, Michigan, played a lot of football, good enough to earn a scholarship to the University of Michigan, and even got offers from the NFL. But I turned them down. I wanted something more, something lasting. I earned my law degree at Yale, served in the Navy during World War II, and then came back home to serve my country in another way. In 1948, I was elected to the House of Representatives, and I stayed there for 25 years. I wasn't flashy. I wasn't the loudest voice in the room, but I worked hard. I earned the trust of my colleagues. Eventually, they made me House Minority Leader. And then, history took an unexpected turn. In 1973, Vice President Spiro Agnew resigned in disgrace. President Nixon needed someone the country could trust, someone Congress would confirm. That's how I became vice president, the first ever appointed under the 25th Amendment. But less than a year later, the presidency fell into my lap. Not by ambition, not by campaign, but by necessity. On August 9th, 1974, Richard Nixon resigned. The nation was reeling from Watergate. The people had lost faith. I took the oath of office in the East Room of the White House and told America, our long national nightmare is over. I didn't ask for that moment, but I accepted it. Because the country needed healing, because the Constitution needed to hold, and because I believed in the strength of our democratic institutions. That's how I became your president, not through the ballot box, but through the rule of law. My job was to steady the ship, to restore trust, to move forward. 1974 was more than just a turning point. It was a reckoning. When I took the oath of office on August 9th of that year, I didn't step into power during a time of celebration. I stepped into a moment of national doubt, of moral fatigue, of political upheaval. America was hurting, and rightly so. Let me take you back. That year began with the long shadow of Watergate hanging over the White House. Each week, new revelations chipped away at the public's confidence. Testimonies, tapes, resignations. The very institutions meant to serve the people had been weaponized to serve political interests. For the first time in American history, a president, Richard Nixon, was forced to resign in disgrace. That alone made 1974 unprecedented. But it wasn't just a political scandal. It was a constitutional test. Could the rule of law truly stand above the office of the presidency? Could a peaceful transfer of power take place amid such scandal? And what would it take to restore trust in government? I didn't come into the presidency by winning an election. I came in through the 25th Amendment. First appointed as vice president after Spiro Agnew's resignation in 1973, and then elevated when Nixon stepped down. I was the only president in American history to serve without being elected to either the presidency or vice presidency. That reality wasn't lost on me. I knew I had to earn the public's trust, not just inherit it. The very day I was sworn in, I spoke plainly to the nation. Our long national nightmare is over. That wasn't just a phrase. It was a plea to begin healing. But the challenges we faced didn't stop at the walls of the White House. The economy in 1974 was sliding into what would become known as stagflation, a dangerous mix of rising prices and stagnant growth. The Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, or OPEC, had slashed oil exports to the United States the year prior in retaliation for our support of Israel during the Yom Kippur War. That embargo rolled into 1974, leading to an energy crisis that hit American families at the pump, in the grocery store, and on their heating bills. Gas stations rationed fuel. Drivers waited in lines that stretched for blocks. It wasn't just inconvenient, it was infuriating. Jobs were becoming harder to find. Interest rates were climbing. The dollar was weakening. The American dream for many felt like it was slipping further away. Then there was the international stage. In Europe and the Soviet bloc, the Cold War was in full force. Every move America made was being scrutinized not only by its own people, but by governments around the world. In the Middle East, tensions remained high following the oil embargo and the Arab-Israeli conflict. In Southeast Asia, the final chapters of America's involvement in Vietnam were coming to a bitter end. South Vietnam was losing ground. Cambodia and Laos were destabilizing. And the scars of that long war were still bleeding in our communities back home. Veterans returned to a divided public, often receiving judgment instead of gratitude. Domestically, Congress was flexing its muscles again, determined to reassert its power after years of executive overreach. The War Powers Act, passed in 1973, was already signaling a shift, and by 74, the legislative branch wasn't afraid to push back. That tension meant every decision I made was under the microscope, and I welcome that. Accountability is not the enemy of leadership, it's the foundation of it. And let's not forget the cultural moment. 1974 was the year Hank Aaron broke Babe Ruth's home run record, an African-American man surpassing a white icon in a sport that once excluded black players entirely. It was a landmark moment, both in sports and in race relations, though not without hatred and threats. It reminded us that while we had made progress, we were still far from perfect. It was also the year that saw the rise of a new kind of journalism, investigative, unrelenting, fearless. Reporters like Woodward and Bernstein had changed the way the press held the powerful to account. And in 1974, the press was no longer just a witness. It had become a pillar of democratic defense. So how did I govern, standing in the middle of all this? I governed with humility. I listened more than I spoke. I believed in compromise, not because it was politically safe, but because it was morally necessary. I prioritized transparency, even when the truth hurt. I didn't pretend to have all the answers, but I knew that hiding the truth would only make things worse. I didn't demonize my opponents. I worked with them. Because when the stakes are that high, partisanship becomes a luxury the country cannot afford. I tried to bring decency back to government, and yes, I pardoned Richard Nixon. I know how controversial that decision was. I knew it might cost me my presidency, but I didn't do it for him. I did it for the country, because I believed that America needed to move on, that justice had been served by his resignation, that if we kept reliving the past, we'd never build a future. I governed not to be remembered, but to help the country recover. Now, you've heard the story of 1974, the chaos, the crises, the courage it took to steady a nation on the edge. And with that context, it's time we look deeper, not just at what happened, but at what was signed, what was set in motion. We're about to begin our journey into the executive orders I issued that year, because each one was a reflection of a moment, a choice, a judgment made not in comfort but in crisis. Let's walk through them together and let history speak for itself. Executive Order 11,798 revoking Executive Order Number 1, 1796 of July 30, 1974, and continuing in effect Executive Order Number 11,533 of June 4, 1970, relating to the administration of export controls on August 14, 1974. Executive Order 11,799 amending Executive Order Number 11,554 as it relates to the establishment of a maximum percentage of Navy and Marine Corps officers who may be recommended for promotion from below the appropriate promotion zone on August 17, 1974. Executive Order 11,800 delegating certain authority vested in the President by the Aviation Career Incentive Act of 1974 on August 17, 1974. Executive Order 11,801, the Honorable Roger P. Davies on August 21, 1974. Executive Order 11,802, General Crichton W. Abrams, Chief of Staff, United States Army on September 4, 1974. Executive Order 11,803. Establishing a clemency board to review certain convictions under the Military Selective Service Act and certain discharges or convictions under the Uniform Code of Military Justice on September 16, 1974. Executive Order 11,804, delegation of certain functions vested in the President to the Director of Selective Service on September 16, 1974. Executive Order 11,805, inspection by President and certain designated employees of the White House Office of Tax Returns made under the Internal Revenue Code of 1954 on September 20th, 1974. Executive Order 11,806, amending Executive Order Number 11,763 to extend the life of the National Commission for the Observance of World Population Year on September 25th, 1974. Executive Order 11,807, Occupational Safety and Health Programs for Federal Employees on September 28, 1974. Executive Order 11,808, establishing the President's Economic Policy Board and for other purposes on September 30, 1974. Executive Order 11,809. Establishing the President's Labor Management Committee on September 30, 1974. Executive Order 11,810. Continuing the regulation of exports on September 30, 1974. Executive Order 11,811. Adjusting rates of pay for certain statutory pay systems on October 7, 1974. Executive Order 11,812. Adjusting the rates of basic pay, basic allowance for subsistence, and basic allowance for quarters for members of the uniformed services on October 7, 1974. Executive Order 11,813, permitting cooperative education students to be given career or career conditional appointments on October 7, 1974. Executive Order 11,814, activation of the Energy Resources Council on October 11, 1974. Executive Order 11,815, delegating to the National Capital Planning Commission the function of establishing the metes and bounds of the National Capital Service Area on October 23, 1974. Executive Order 11,816, delegation of certain reporting functions under the Foreign Assistance Act to the Secretary of the Treasury on October 23, 1974. Executive Order 11,817, delegating the United States Civil Service Commission as the agent to concur with agency determinations fixing the age limits within which original appointments may be made on November 5, 1974. Executive Order 11,818, revoking Executive Order Number 11,810 and continuing in effect Executive Order Number 11,533, relating to the administration of export control on November 5, 1974. Executive Order 11,819, membership of the Energy Resources Council on November 16, 1974. Executive Order 11,820, International Council on Archives Bicentennial Year meeting on November 27, 1974. Executive Order 11,821, inflation impact statements on November 27, 1974. Executive Order 11,822. Designation of certain officers to act as Secretary of the Treasury on December 10, 1974. Executive Order 11,823. Abolishing the National Commission for Industrial Peace on December 12, 1974. Executive Order 11,824, exemption of Whitney Gilliland from mandatory retirement on December 28, 1974. Executive Order 11,825, revocation of executive orders pertaining to the regulation of the acquisition of, holding of, or other transactions in gold on December 31, 1974. Executive Order 11,826, exemption of Willard Deason from mandatory retirement on December 31, 1974.
1974.
Pauline's Pizza,
That year,
where we deliver happiness one slice at a time. What's your craving today? Yeah, hi. Is Seymour there?
Oh, Seymour. I think he might be busy making our special pies. But hey, why not swing by the pizzeria? We've got a pie with your name on it. Anything else I can help you with?
I was looking for Seymour Butts.
Ah, I see. Well, if you're looking for Seymour Butts, he might be hiding behind a pepperoni slice. Anything else I can do for you today?
No, that's it.
Hi, I'm Terrence, a marketing professional with a passion for helping your business grow smarter and faster. Here at Da Bomb Digital Media, based right here in Atlanta, Georgia, we specialize in bringing your vision to life. Whether you're launching your first website or reimagining your entire digital presence, we've got you covered. From modern website design and search engine optimization to setting up your own AI-powered agency tools, we deliver innovative solutions that keep you ahead of the curve. Ready to unlock your business's full potential? Let's build something remarkable together. For more information, visit our YouTube channel. Just search Da Bomb Digital Media on YouTube and start exploring tips, success stories, and everything you need to elevate your brand.
1974. That year didn't just change who sat in the Oval Office. It changed the very way Americans looked at government. Now I remember it well. I was just over a year into my first term in the Senate, still grieving the loss of my wife and daughter, still trying to find my footing. And then, boom, the whole country lost its footing. Watergate didn't just bring down a presidency, it shattered the public's trust in the system. And in the middle of that storm, Gerald R. Ford took the oath, a decent man, a man of integrity, and most of all, a healer. He didn't run for that office, he didn't campaign for it. But he walked into the job because the country needed someone to calm the waters, someone to steady the ship of state, and he did. Now, I want to talk for a moment about the executive orders he signed during those first critical months, because those weren't just bureaucratic memos. They were decisions made in the crucible of crisis. Take the creation of the President's Economic Policy Board, Executive Order 11808. That wasn't just another committee. That was Ford trying to respond to inflation that was eating away at the average family's paycheck. Prices were going up, jobs were shrinking. The oil crisis was making it hard for folks just to get to work. And that order, it was an attempt to bring the best minds together, to make coordinated decisions and stop the bleeding. Or look at the clemency board he created, EO11803. That was about healing after Vietnam. Thousands of young Americans had refused the draft or deserted, not because they were cowards, but because they were torn apart by a war that tore this nation apart. Ford offered them a path back, not a blanket pardon, but a way to re-enter society with dignity. That meant something. And then there's occupational safety, Executive Order 11807. Ford made it clear that even during economic hardship, the safety of federal workers still mattered. That's leadership that sees beyond the headlines and into the daily lives of working people. But it wasn't all clean sailing. Some orders, like the one continuing Nixon-era export controls, Executive Order 11810 and its revisions, raised questions about transparency and economic direction. And of course, his pardon of Nixon, while not an executive order, cast a long shadow over every move he made. Still, you can't evaluate Ford's executive actions without understanding the moment. He was governing during free fall, and his orders reflected that: urgent, restorative, sometimes controversial, but always grounded in the desire to hold this republic together. They weren't just policy shifts, they were bandages, they were bridges. Some helped ease tensions, others stirred them. But each one tells a story about how a man who never sought the presidency tried to carry the weight of it with grace. Now, if you'll walk with me a bit longer, I want to take a closer look at 10 of those executive orders, the ones I believe had the biggest impact on that year and the years that followed. Let's break them down, one by one. Now let's dive deeper into the top 10 executive orders of 1974. Each of these wasn't just a line on paper. They were policy decisions made at a time when the country was on edge, and they still ripple into the present. We'll begin with number one. Number one, Executive Order 11808, establishing the President's Economic Policy Board, signed September 30th, 1974. This was President Ford's most important executive action that year. The economy in 1974 was unraveling. Inflation was at 12%, interest rates were punishing working families, and the fallout from the oil embargo had Americans questioning if the government had a grip on the crisis. Ford's response was this: bring the brightest minds under one roof and create a permanent, high-level board that could advise, coordinate, and react faster than Congress alone could manage. The President's Economic Policy Board wasn't just symbolic. It brought together the Secretary of Treasury, the Chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors, and key players from across agencies. For the first time, you had economic, energy, labor, and financial policy all being developed in sync. No more fragmented responses, no more internal contradictions. This structure, a president-centered, multi-agency board, became a blueprint. It paved the way for how we operate our National Economic Council today. The methods they piloted in 1974 were used during the 2008 financial crash and even during the COVID-19 response. Without Executive Order 11,808, the presidency might have remained reactive. With it, the White House became a central driver of real-time economic policy. Number 2, Executive Order 11,803, establishing the Clemency Board. Signed, September 16, 1974. Vietnam tore this country in two. It didn't end cleanly, and it didn't end quietly. Thousands of young men either resisted the draft or deserted once deployed. By 1974, the war was over for America, but the social wounds remained. Ford's Executive Order 11,803 established the Presidential Clemency Board, a bipartisan group tasked with reviewing the cases of draft evaders and military deserters. But this wasn't a blanket amnesty. It was conditional. People had to perform community service or reaffirm allegiance to the Constitution. This order was Ford's attempt to reconcile the country, to heal, not forget. It gave families a chance to welcome sons home. It turned the page, however controversially, and it inspired later clemency programs for nonviolent offenders and post-war reintegration efforts. That framework was echoed decades later in how we approach returning combatants, reform criminal justice policy, and shape national attitudes on service, dissent, and forgiveness. Number 3, Executive Order 11,807, Occupational Safety and Health Programs for Federal Employees. Signed, September 28, 1974. Private sector workers had the Occupational Safety and Health Act, but strangely, federal employees didn't, at least not explicitly. Ford changed that with Executive Order 11,807. He directed every federal agency to create a real enforceable safety program. That meant training. That meant inspections. That meant holding supervisors accountable when government employees were put at risk. And it wasn't just about policy, it was about respect. A message that federal workers, the mail carriers, the inspectors, the veterans hospital staff deserve protection. This was the foundation of what later became the Federal Advisory Council on Occupational Safety and Health, which shaped not only internal agency policy, but also influenced OSHA's modern jurisdiction. When we talk about federal workplace protections today, we're still building on what Ford laid down in 1974, number 4, Executive Order 11,825, revoking restrictions on gold ownership, signed December 31st, 1974. For over 40 years, Americans couldn't legally own large amounts of gold bullion. That policy dated back to the Great Depression, a time when the government wanted to control inflation and prevent hoarding. But by 1974, the times had changed. The U.S. had left the gold standard. The economy was more global. Americans were investing, saving, and trying to hedge against rising prices. EO 11,825 reversed all the old orders regulating gold, going back to 1933. This wasn't just about letting people buy coins. It reopened personal freedom in markets. It helped restore confidence in U.S. currency flexibility. And it launched a private gold market that remains vibrant today, from investors to jewelers to central bank reserves. When people talk about gold as a hedge today, that conversation wasn't possible until Ford lifted that curtain. Number 5, Executive Orders 11,810 and 11,818, Regulation of Exports and Strategic Goods. Signed September 30th and November 5th, 1974. In the wake of Vietnam and amid Cold War tensions, export controls became a key tool. EO 11810 and later EO 11818 were about national security. Ford reasserted that the executive branch would maintain oversight of sensitive technology exports, from semiconductors to aerospace parts. These weren't just about economics. They were about keeping critical knowledge and infrastructure away from adversaries. These controls were refined over the years and remained in place through modern structures like ITAR and the Department of Commerce's Entity List, which today target nations like China and Russia. What Ford established wasn't short-term. It's the backbone of how we protect our intellectual and technological edge to this day. Number 6, Executive Order 11,821. Inflation Impact Statements, signed November 27, 1974. With prices soaring, Ford knew the federal government had to lead by example. EO 11,821 required agencies to analyze how their rules and spending would impact inflation before they acted. It was the first time economic accountability became part of executive policy making. It wasn't just about saving money, it was about stopping bureaucratic decisions from worsening an already fragile economy. Though the order expired in 1977, it inspired the modern-day regulatory impact analyses we see from the Office of Management and Budget today. Every rule, from EPA limits to labor protections, is now weighed against its economic impact. Ford's idea became standard practice in modern governance. Number 7, Executive Order 11,812, Adjusting Military Pay and Allowances, signed October 7, 1974. America was leaving a war, morale was low, recruitment was struggling, and Ford understood that if we were going to have an all-volunteer force, we had to treat them right. EO 11812 raised basic pay, food allowances, and housing stipends for uniformed service members. It said clearly, we respect your service, and we're going to show it on your paycheck.
Some write history with blood, some with laws, but the sharpest stroke comes from the pen. Executive power ain't just a tool, it's a weapon wielded by the few, affecting the many. They sign it, we live it. They order it, we obey it. Here, watching, digging, remembering, from the plantation to the proclamation, from internment camps to civil rights stands, from surveillance laws to student loan draws. Order can change your life, and you might not even know it, but now you do. So stay locked in, stay woke, stay sharp. We ain't just talking about power, we tracking it. Executive Order Watch, and we ain't blinking.